At first, everyone laughed. The waiter shoved him outside, customers recorded with their phones, and no one cared. But they had no idea who this old man really was. What happened next changed everything. Not just for them, but maybe for you too. Watch till the end for a powerful lesson. And let us know where you're watching from. In the heart of the bustling city, an old man named Walter walked slowly along the sidewalk. His clothes were tattered, his body frail, and his hands trembled from hunger. Every step was a struggle, not just because of his weak body, but because of the judgmental stares that followed him. He stopped in front of a high-end restaurant, peering through the glass. The aroma of grilled meat and freshly baked bread filled the air, making his empty stomach tighten with pain. For a moment, he just stood there, gathering the courage to step inside. All he wanted was a little food, not a feast, just something to keep him going. But the moment he entered, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations quieted, eyes turned, and whispers spread across the room. Walter swallowed hard and kept his head down. He wasn't there to cause trouble, he was just trying to survive. As soon as Walter stepped inside, the room fell silent. Utensils stopped clinking, conversations paused. Every eye was now on him. A well-dressed woman wrinkled her nose and whispered to her husband, "Why do they let people like him in here?" A young man in the corner smirked, pulling out his phone to record. To them, this wasn't a tragedy, it was entertainment. A waiter rushed over, his expression filled with disdain. "Sir, you can't be in here," he said coldly. Walter's voice was barely above a whisper. I just need a little food. I can pay later, I promise." The waiter scoffed. "Pay? With what? Empty pockets?" Laughter rippled through the room. A businessman near the window shook his head. People like him should know their place. Walter clenched his worn-out coat, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. He wasn't asking for much, just a single meal to get through another day. But the waiter didn't care. With one firm push, he forced Walter toward the door. His frail body nearly collapsed, but he managed to stay on his feet. A few customers chuckled. Phones continued recording. Walter's heart ached, not from hunger, but from the cruelty of a world that refused to see him as human. Then, the laughter stopped. The sound of approaching footsteps cut through the air. Steady, authoritative. A man in a sharp suit entered the restaurant. His expensive watch gleamed under the chandelier lights. Immediately, the energy in the room shifted. Everyone recognized him, John Carter, the restaurant's owner. The waiter's face paled. His confidence evaporated as John stepped in front of him, locking eyes with a piercing gaze. "What do you think you're doing?" John's voice was calm, yet laced with authority. The waiter swallowed hard. "Sir, I was just ensuring the comfort of our customers. This man doesn't belong here." John sighed, then turned to Walter, who was still on the floor, his hands trembling slightly. His eyes were hollow, as if he had faced this kind of humiliation too many times before. But this time, things were different. John reached out and helped Walter to his feet. "You don't deserve to be treated this way," he said firmly. The room buzzed with confusion. Why was the owner defending a homeless man? Then, John looked straight at the waiter, disappointment heavy in his gaze. "You have no idea who you just insulted." Silence. Everyone held their breath. Who was this old man? The tension in the room thickened. John let out a slow breath, then looked at Walter with something close to reverence. "Sir, you may not remember me," he said, voice trembling slightly. "But I have never forgotten you." Walter frowned. "Remember you?" John smiled faintly. "Many years ago, when I was just a child, I was lost and starving on the streets. People walked past me, ignoring my cries for help. No one cared, except for one man." John swallowed, emotion thick in his voice. "A poor old man shared his food with me, even though he barely had enough for himself. He said to me, 'Don't be afraid, son. If you survive today, tomorrow will be better.'" Walter's eyes widened. Slowly, a distant memory surfaced. John's smile grew. "That man was you." Walter froze. His throat tightened. All those years ago, he had given food to a lost, starving boy. And now, that boy stood before him as a successful man. Without hesitation, John pulled Walter into a firm embrace. "From now on, you'll never go hungry again." The once mocking restaurant guests sat in stunned silence, guilt washing over them. They had laughed, recorded, and turned their backs on a man who had once performed an act of pure kindness, expecting nothing in return. John turned to his staff. "Prepare the finest meal for Mr. Walter. And one more thing." He glanced at the waiter who had thrown Walter out. "This kind of behavior will never happen in my restaurant again." The waiter nodded quickly, his face flushed with shame. Meanwhile, Walter sat at the best table in the house. This time, not as someone looked down upon, but as an honored guest. The lesson? Never judge someone by their appearance. The kindness you give today may return to you in ways you never expect.